Information is Fundamental by Alfred Joyce. Video Part 1. Introduction. Have you ever wondered what the universe is? Or if it has a purpose? Or what your relation to the universe is besides being a part of it? The best way to understand how anything evolved to become what it is to look at its origin and understand what it is and what led it to evolve into what it has become. And so that's the strategy that will be employed to understand our universe. In the Zero chapter, A Glimpse into the Fundamental Principle of the Universe, we will establish what information actually is and why it is fundamental, the origin of the universe. We will also demonstrate that information permeates the entire universe at all levels of reality, and that the universe doesn't require a creator, nor can it have a fundamental purpose. In the Communication chapter, A Glimpse at the Transcendent Human, we will examine the dynamism between the fundamental level and the emergent humanity level. We will focus on some of the tools humans use to perceive the universe, namely vocabulary and self-awareness, and how the meaning of life and of everything is created by us based on our information processing capabilities. And finally, we will offer ways to live in harmony with the fundamental principle of the universe. The Zero chapter, A Glimpse into the Fundamental Principle of the Universe. 1. What information is and why it is fundamental. Information is fundamental. First things first, let's define what is meant by information. According to Wikipedia, information is that which answers the question of what an entity is and thus defines both its essence and nature of its characteristics. In other words, information is the representative assimilation of an entity which is defined by what it is made of and what it does. Therefore, any and every entity is answered/can be explained in terms of information. For example, if asking, what is an apple? The answer would be, an apple is its information. Answering an apple is a fruit would only be part of its information, thus not completely and fundamentally answering what it is. Answering an apple is atoms would also only be part of its information, etc. Only information, which includes the characteristics of being a fruit, made of atoms, edible by living beings, grows on trees, etc., contains all the apple's information. The correct answer would be the apple is information. As we'll see at the fundamental level, the apple doesn't have its own information. Secondly, let's define what is meant by fundamental. According to the Cambridge Dictionary definition, fundamental means forming the base from which everything else develops. In other words, there is no base/state/moment/event/position/etc. prior to the fundamental. And since anything and everything is answered in terms of information, information is the base from which everything else develops. Hence, information is fundamental. Now let's see if we can take a closer look at what information represents and how it supports the claim of being fundamental. So, information is two things in one. One aspect being its essence, what it is actually made of, or what its substance is at its most fundamental level, and the other aspect being its characteristic, how it behaves or what it does. which is intrinsic to what it is. This dual component constitutes information. They go hand in hand. It is impossible to have one without the other, or separately. Whatever is must have a characteristic/property, and similarly, if there's a characteristic, it must be a characteristic of some entity. Even nothing has a characteristic. It's not something. No entity can have an essence that doesn't feature a characteristic, nor can an entity have a characteristic without an essence. Essence and characteristic are fundamentally inseparable. Therefore, they are treated together as one entity, information. Attempting to divide information in search of a more fundamental level could be compared to attempting to divide the number 0. No matter by how much you divide the number 0, the end result will be 0. One might be tempted to ask, how can information be fundamental when it has two components? Why aren't those two components the two fundamental things? The answer is because of the fundamental nature/composition of information. The two components, essence and characteristic, are actually the same one thing. Information's essence is its characteristic, and vice versa. Similar to how a coin has two sides to it. For a coin to be, it must have two sides, and no one side of the coin can be without its existence creating the other side. Vocabulary is one of our tools to express these intricate concepts, so it's important we truly grasp the understanding of key fundamental words. Hidden within the word essence, if we understand it accurately, we'll notice that the concept of characteristic is also present, and vice versa. Similarly to how within the side of a coin is hidden the concept of the feature of another side to the coin. Finally, it could be understood as essence is information at rest, while characteristic is information in action. But please keep in mind that information doesn't choose one over the other. It's constantly being/expressing/doing both simultaneously. This intrinsic dual nature of information is an important concept. Within its fundamental nature, we notice the origins of the infinite and the passage of time, which leads to the birth of time. Indeed, the essence component of information is an everlasting primordial fabric/substance, never changing what it is made of. Therefore, its state could be understood as at rest. The characteristic component of information is an action/process, which implies something happening, and something happening can only happen in time. Even though the essence component never changes what it is made of, it is constantly in unison with the characteristic component of doing something/in action. We'll revisit this concept further down the line. For now, let's return to the understanding of information now that we've explained its intrinsic dual component nature. Information doesn't require a creator other than itself. Information always was and will be. Supposing there were anything that created the very first initial information, whatever that thing/entity would be by definition information in itself. It would be a thing/entity made of something, its essence, that created information, its characteristic, the embodiment of the definition of information. Only information can create information. Therefore, the essence of information is information, since information can only be made of information. Thus, information is fundamental. Information is the starting point of what we call the universe. The most fundamental aspect of the universe is information. Information is the essence of the universe, meaning the universe is fundamentally made of one thing: information. Information might take on various shapes, sizes, colors, states, or whatever, but no matter the variety, it will still be information. All that is, and all that isn't, and all that ever will be, is and will be information at its most fundamental level. There's no escaping that. Now that we've established our starting point, let's progress from there. We know that this one word, information, has a dual property. It has an essence and an interdependent characteristic. Everything that emerges from the universe must inherit and follow this fundamental blueprint at all levels of emergence. What information does is understand, have an intrinsic knowledge of what it is made of, its essence, and process information accordingly, its characteristic. Information thus has a fundamental built-in mechanism. Particles are subjected to this mechanism, molecules are subjected to this mechanism, cells are subjected to this mechanism, living beings are subjected to this mechanism. Literally, everything is subjected to this mechanism. The fundamental characteristic of information is the information processes information mechanism. Now we see how the dual components of information, essence and characteristic, are indeed information and information being processed. So information is simultaneously information and information being processed, which explains how information processes itself. All that is, and all that ever will be, at its core, is just information processing information. The universe is a processing of information. That is the fundamental principle of the universe. So let's quickly summarize. Information at its most fundamental level, meaning its essence, is information. The fundamental characteristic of information is the information processes information mechanism. With this understanding, we are staying true to our initial definition of the word information at its most fundamental level, which features the minimal dual component of one essence, information, and one characteristic, to process information. Notice, we haven't needed to use more than two terms, simply information and to process. This dual terminology solidifies its symmetry with the fundamental level it describes. And it also signifies that only one verb is fundamentally applicable to the universe because it only has one fundamental action: to process. In addition, it's important to note that information isn't an assigned emergent concept like the letter H or the number 2. Information is the primordial entity, just like we perceive an apple to be, or metal, or proton, or a quantum field, or the fabric of space-time, all of which are perceived groupings of information. Information is the most fundamental thing, the fundamental building block, the primordial source fabric/substance of the universe and everything in it. Once information appeared, it marked the creation of the universe, and vice versa. When the universe was born, so was information. As explained earlier, information has no creator but itself, so it never did appear. It always was. And the universe wasn't born, it always was. Also, information is the name we're calling this primordial source fabric/substance of the universe because of the definition of the word, as we discussed, an entity defined by its essence and characteristics. We could name this primordial source fabric/substance of the universe pancake, But then that wouldn't fit the definition of the word pancake as we know it. So let's keep these equivalences in mind. Entity equals universe. Essence equals information. Characteristic equals to process information. But please understand, all three words are interchangeable and represent the same thing: information. The universe is information. Information can't be without its processing characteristic. The processing characteristic must be a characteristic of some entity. So what we are doing is using different terms to better understand the complementary nature of this one thing: information.